Welcome, one and all, to the Ferret and Raccoon podcast, episode 185. I am your one and only host for this podcast, the Angry Raccoon, bringing you the first podcast of February 2021. And boy, has it been a eventful week for me in my life. My job has been quite stressful over the last couple of days, but at least now I have some time off, so that's good. Hopefully I'll be getting some things done and out the way, and I guess eventful around the world in terms of things happening and hopefully not happening to some extent, but I do not want to dwell on those things right now because that's not what this podcast is about. We got quite a busy and I guess packed podcast because a lot of things happened in terms of media and just, I don't know, I guess people are finally starting to show off things that will eventually be coming out in 2022 soon as I guess the industry or industries are a little bit more confident to actually release things, hoping and knowing, well, I guess praying to some extent that there isn't going to be another situation like we had back in 2020. But yeah, let's waste no time and talk about some of the things I did, well, at least the one thing I did, and that was a bit of a surprise for me to some extent, and that was I actually watched Sing 2, the Illumination animated film, sequel to the original that came out couple years ago, and it's worth saying, if I haven't said it before, I did not like the original Sing film. I thought it was awful. So watching the second film, I was pleasantly surprised that it was actually a good film. Like, surprisingly good. It feels like a, how should I put it, a massive step up in almost every way from the original film. Like, this film looks gorgeous, is one of the biggest things I can say about it without spoiling too much. It looks nice. Like, really nice. The lighting is spot on, the animation is pretty fluid, and there are so many nice details that are surprising. It's definitely one of those films that you kind of got to see to kind of understand and appreciate those moments where they really put in the effort. Other things that I thought were pretty great about it, I think the cast is pretty good overall. I'm not a massive fan of jukebox musicals, but I think the songs they did choose to sing were good. For that matter, I think there was a good selection there, minus a few songs that they played. But yeah, there are a few downsides to this film. I'm not going to spoil all of them. Go into all my, criticisms of it. But I will say one thing. It's got a very odd pace for the most part. It feels quite rushed, which is a bit of a problem because they're trying to tell a very big story and also trying to tell multiple mini stories. So you kind of get this sense of, it kind of just moving too fast and there not being scenes, and it kind of feels a little bit incomplete to some extent. But a lot of things were really great about it. I loved a lot of the new characters as well. I thought they were a great addition. If they do a third film, I'd love to see more of them. Particularly characters like Nushi and Suki Lane, Portia as well. I'm sure people have probably seen those characters to some extent, given that people have already started drawing the fan art of them and that. But yeah, I actually really liked it. It's actually a good film. Not the greatest film I've ever seen, but a good film. So, you know what, props to the team who made this. I do kind of feel like whoever made this sequel did actually look at the first one and kind of go, we need to do better. And I'd like to think that. But yeah, let's move on to, our topics and that. And I'm going to try and do something different once again this time. And I'm actually going to talk about 2 Kickstarter projects that you guys might be interested in, given that they kind of fall in line with some of the things we do talk about in regards to the podcast and the things we're interested in. And the first one is going to be for the Oban Star Racers 15th anniversary Blu-ray, release, or it's hard to necessarily say what exactly it is. Well, I do know what it is. Essentially, the series that came out in the early 2000s, which was the combination of, I think, French and Japanese animation. So it's kind of both French animation and anime to an extent. Essentially, they want to be re-releasing this series on Blu-ray, given that it hasn't been. And it is interesting because this series has been on my list for years, and I was honestly shocked that the series hadn't been released on DVD or Blu-ray, at least in this country. I don't necessarily know if it was shown or aired in this country during the time. I haven't actually looked, but yeah, I think with something as significant as this, it really needs to be distributed. I mean, I actually don't know that much about this series, so I can't really hype you on it. And I should specify as well, with these Kickstarters, I'm not trying to sell you on them. I'm just trying to let you know I haven't been paid off or anything like that. But yeah, I don't know much about this series, but it's always been a series that's interested me, purely because of the fact that it was, like I said, a French animation and Japanese anime, combination project. It's a bit more common now in these days to have, I guess, two countries or two industries to an extent come together and work on something, such as the Netflix's like Castlevania series, which I believe is animated in Japan, but everything else production-wise, the voices is done over in the West. And yes, Western studios back in the day, I'm talking 80s and 90s, did send their rough animatics over to Japan in order for them to finish them. So yeah, but it is an interesting series, maybe the first of its kind to some extent. I don't quite know, but it is worth mentioning, which is why I'm mentioning it here. And it is a bit of a shame that the independent team, or this independent team, and the creators themselves have to be the ones to distribute this series. But at the same time, that's the great thing about the internet and the industry, and I guess Kickstarter in some way. It's now possible to communicate with your audience on such a level, and you're the one who is in control of your own artwork, as opposed to a studio who just essentially cancel your show and shelf it, which happens too much. And I think studios still need to be giving creators the rights back to their shows. That should just be an industry standard now. And yeah, I wanted to mention this Kickstarter because I know that this series has a bit of a cult following, and I didn't want fans or people who are interested in anime or just want to know about something they never heard of to miss out on hearing about this project. So if you're interested, go back this project. I think I'll definitely be backing this. I love me a Blu-ray collector's edition, and given how the tiers and rewards are going, it looks like that Blu-ray collection is going to be nice and chunky, which is how I like them. Next one I want to talk about is for Mina the Hollower, which is going to be Yacht Club's next game. Yacht Club being the studio that made the very beloved, very well-known Shovel Knight game, which came out a couple years ago. And yeah, this is their next game, which they are kickstarting, and I'm going to get into why they're kickstarting, because I'm sure some of you may be wondering. But yeah, I guess I haven't really looked too much into the base premise, but it seems like you're going to be playing as a character called Mina, obviously, who is a hollower who kind of uses, I guess, science and magic to some extent in order to fight evils in, the story that's going to happen in this, in this game to some extent. I don't really want to spoil too much because there's a lot to talk about with this game, because I would just say read the page, because yeah, they go into every single detail, and I don't want to just relist it, especially if you're going to go and look at it anyway. But I'd recommend looking at the trailer, which I've put in the description and the download link. The Oban Star Racers one is there as well, in case you want to just look at it or back it. But yeah, I am in love with like the inspiration and the combining of like the GBA Castlevania games, being, the adventures of Belmont's Revenge, the Legends, and the combination with The Legend of Zelda that this game has kind of used to make its own thing. I mean, much like with Shovel Knight, it's something new, it's something old, it's something borrowed, and they just really excel at kind of having something that's very nostalgic, but not just nostalgia, if that makes sense. I mean, it's refreshing, and given that these kinds of games don't exist, or at least aren't in like the mainstream eye to some extent, younger audiences may not have experienced a gameplay style like this. It'll be new to them, but it'll be hopefully familiar and evolved to me to some extent. And that's kind of what Shovel Knight was. I got what it was, but there was enough things there to make it stand out, which I think is why it's as famous as it is now. I love the simplistic creativity in this game. Like Mina, who is our main character, she's like a little mouse character who's like uses throwing items. She burrows under the ground, and she uses a whip. I mean, that's just old school character design. That's a protagonist from back in the day, which I think they absolutely nailed in some extent. I mean, Mina has like a simple yet classic design. Like, she's a love letter to like the Belmonts, and maybe they've taken a little bit of inspiration from the character Ferret Crescent, I believe is like that rat character from Final Fantasy 9. I hope I said her name right. She's like the perfect mascot for like what they're doing, being Mina. She feels like her own character while kind of like embodying like the spirit of like the games and the characters that came before her. I mean, you may look at the character and be like, oh, it's just whatever, but you know, it's carefully done without it being too carefully or too of reference, if that makes sense. And I really do hope that she and the game becomes as iconic as Shovel Knight, because I think Yacht Club, being the studio that they are, kind of deserve that recognition, especially given the games that they've made and, you know, everything else that they strive to do. The borrowing mechanic is quite interesting. It's really interesting as it has like multiple uses in game. It can be used for platforming and dodging at the same time, which is great. I also noticed in the trailer that she threw an item at an enemy, and as it was like traveling back to her, she like used her whip. She used her whip to whip that item, and it like hit the enemy again. Like, that's a cool mechanic and something that you don't always see in these kinds of games, which is once again going back to the whole idea of, you know, it being evolved, it being something new. I'm loving the dark, like, gothic setting, and like the world like sounds fantastic given what they've described. It seems to be taking place in like an 18th century like themed island that like revolves around science and technology, which is, you know, I can't think of too many games that have that kind of setting. And they also mention on the Kickstarter page that they've taken inspiration from films and I guess media books, such as Dracula, Frankenstein, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So I hope to see like elements of that kind of play into the game, whether they be bosses or just aesthetics within the world. I'm sure a lot of you are probably thinking and wondering, given I've mentioned Yacht Club, I've mentioned Shovel Knight, most people know about Shovel Knight, you know, why is Yacht Club Games, you know, the creators of, you know, arguably a successful game, doing a Kickstarter for their new game? You know, shouldn't they have the money to fund this? You know, like, what's going on? You know, are they, well, I guess I can kind of explain, because they themselves on the page do explain and kind of go into details as to what this is about. And I guess I'll quote it for you just in case you want to read it. And quote, compared to our original Kickstarter, we're not in dire straits. We're financing the majority of Mina the Hollower's development internally. Our main reason for launching a Kickstarter this time is to build a brand new universe in the same way we did with our first game, Shovel Knight, with our community involved in creating something special along with us. Every backer that joins the development will help to make a more robust game. Together, we'll break new ground. Simply put, we'll break new ground. But like as I was saying, simply put, they want to establish and know who their audience is. You know what the fans want from this series. They kind of want to build a relationship with fans, and develop, and use the money to develop a more use the extra money to essentially polish the game off, even further. And I would imagine some of that money made is going to be, used to kind of make all the rewards and that. Like, I know they're going to be doing like a plushie and an art book, and I think like a pin as well, like you stick on your clothes. So yeah, kind of fumbled reading that quote. That's why I usually don't read quotes. But yeah, you can check out all the information that they have regarding the game on their page. But if I were to give one criticism about the Kickstarter, and that is that, it's surprising that the New Game Plus is like so far down the stretch goals. Like, I would have thought that it would have been like the first goal, because New Game Plus is like a standard now in just games in general. So yeah, I find that a bit odd. But at the same time, and at the time of this recording, it looks like it's made it to that goal. So I guess that's good. But yeah, I would have thought that it would have been a little bit higher up, or that was a given. But yeah, that's my only real criticism. I'll be back in this game because it looks amazing and I want to support Yacht Club. I'm still undecided as to which tier I'm going to go for, because I really do want a physical art book, because I would love to know more about how modern day pixel art 8-bit, 16-bit games are made. Like, how exactly are Yacht Club doing this? How are they replicating it in today's age? And I'm sure for any developers who are making their own independent games or just kind of want to get into that, I think supporting them, or at least following what they do, will be valuable information, especially if you want to kind of follow in their lines. But yeah, those are two things you guys might be interested in. Hopefully you guys do back it, or at least spread the word, I would say, because if it's not for you, tell somebody else. Maybe they'll get what they want from those Kickstarters. But yeah, another story we have to talk about, and that is going to be the fact that Sony is going to be acquiring, or has acquired, developer Bungie, which a lot of us experienced a sense of deja vu when hearing this, because on the previous podcast I talked about the fact that Microsoft is going to be acquiring Activision Blizzard. So yeah, we've done a full circle to some extent. Now, I'm sure that this acquisition has been in the works for months, but the timing does make it seem like Sony did this out of some kind of spite towards Microsoft after they acquired Activision Blizzard a few weeks ago. But we now find ourselves in quite an ironic position, as Sony now owns the developers that made the good Halo games, whereas Microsoft now owns Crash Bandicoot and Spyro, who were originally owned by Sony and were essentially the poster boys for the PlayStation 1. So yeah, it's really weird when you think about it in that sense. To me, this feels like a random deal just done for the sake of it, or like because it's the in and popular trendy thing for massive companies to acquire other developers / studios because they can. In reality, they're just buying talent in hopes that under their new management, they'll make something good. It's not as if this is a new thing. It just feels more common these days, which makes me a little bit sad to know that this is the new norm to some extent. And I am a little bit fearful for other developers, because I would hate for them to be bought out by Microsoft or Sony, and then their franchises, those talented people, that name just gets liquefied like it always does to some extent. I'm still surprised that there are some studios that are still alive within bigger companies, but I'm pretty sure every single day they are just as surprised. But yeah, I know that Microsoft has said that they are not going to stop buying developers and studios, because they have unlimited money, and who's really going to stop them or really say no to them? I'm sure their spending spree is what inspired Sony to do the same thing in recent years. And to an extent, I understand why Microsoft is doing this. At their previous state, before they acquired the likes of Mojang and ZeniMax and Ninja Theory and Obsidian Entertainment, Double Fine, and a couple others I can't quite think of right now, they didn't really stand a chance against Sony's legacy and popularity. Sony does have the popular IPs. They do have the more well-known games, from the past and in the present. So yeah, Sony is to some extent at a disadvantage, but now that they've got, Bethesda and I guess now Activision Blizzard, they've got a massive catalog of very popular and very well-known IPs that can really, put them right next to Sony in terms of that, I don't know what you call it, iconography, I guess you could say. But yeah, it is interesting. I mean, the last thing I want for this industry is for everyone established to be owned and eventually liquefied by Sony and Microsoft. I mean, where's the fun? Where's the variety and competition in a 2-3 horse race, the third being Nintendo? That doesn't sound like fun, knowing that, you're only ever going to get a game from those three guys. I know the independent industry is still there, and that's honestly where a lot of my attention is focused on, because, between you and me, Sony's games look pretty generic, and Microsoft just doesn't release anything that's really that unique. So yeah, it is a bit strange when you kind of look at it and think about things. I mean, I just don't think this is going to pan out well for anyone, and I'm including myself and gamers alike. Sure, we might get a few franchises returning, but I really don't see Sony or Microsoft experimenting or taking any creative risk with the talent they've just bought. Both of them will most likely just sit on it, not do anything. I mean, this whole situation and these companies do remind me of dragons. They basically have this treasure, but all they'll do is just sit on it and hoard it and do nothing just to spite the other to an extent. But that's business, and that's how awful it can be. Fun fact as well, while I was doing research for this episode, did you know that Microsoft actually tried to buy Discord and Square Enix a couple years ago? Yeah, both of them rejected, but it's only a matter of time before they attempt to buy more Japanese studios, because they're both butting heads right now. I'm sure Microsoft and Sony are just going, who can we buy? And I'm sure when they do get rejected, it probably does knock their ego to some extent. In regard to the acquisition itself, which I haven't actually mentioned, I honestly couldn't care less. Bungie hasn't made anything I care for, nor do I think they ever will make anything I'll ever play. So yeah, I don't really care. Moving on to news stories and topics, and staying with games, we have the Nintendo Direct, which was for the 9th of February 2022. And I'm not going to talk about every single trailer. I am going to talk about a few, and I'm going to go quite quickly because I don't want this podcast to be too long, especially soon as a lot of these trailers and a lot of these things they announced, there isn't really that much to say other than just to kind of give my brief thoughts on it. But yeah, I'm going to put the full direct in the description in case you want to watch the full video, but I'm going to talk about all the things that were interesting to me, so they'll be in the description as well. So first I want to talk about is Fire Emblem Warriors 3 Hopes. I'm actually happy to see another Nintendo / Fire Emblem Dynasty Warrior collaboration game because I do really like hack and slash games. I know I own Hyrule Warriors, and I know that game was fun, if not a little bit janky. Hopefully this one is a little bit more polished, I guess you could say. I don't know anything about Fire Emblem Three Houses. I still haven't played it yet. Is this a sequel or a retelling of the original game? I don't know. Regardless, it looks fun to me, and hopefully the people who did like the Hyrule Warriors one and the previous Fire Emblem Warriors hack and slash one, hopefully they'll enjoy this, and hopefully it'll be the best one. Next one I want to talk about is Advance Wars 1 and 2 Reboot Camp. This is the remake of the GBA games that came out well over 20 years ago. I was about to say 200 years there. 20 years ago. One of my favorite franchises, a franchise I would love to see come back. I actually own both of these games, which are now quite tricky to find and very expensive, so best of luck to you. I'm still really hyped for these remakes, only because I hope it sells well and that it introduces more people to the series, especially the Fire Emblem crowd, because they're very similar games. Please go support the, Advance Wars games. There's only 3 of them, so please do. I kind of miss the art style in the original games, but the animation in this remake is really smooth and it's still faithful to those games, so I can't really complain too much. And I'm also so glad that they have the mechanic that you can speed up battles and gameplay, because that needs to be an industry standard right now, because yeah, some strategy games can go on and I don't know why they make the animation so slow sometimes, but yeah. Really wanted to just shout out this game because it's a franchise I love, and I just want more people to know about it. Next game I want to talk about, another surprise, a lot of surprises on this direct. I'm probably going to be saying that word a lot. Is Mario Strikers Battle League, a new Mario football game after so long. The last one was on the Wii, and that was an interesting game because I know the last one had a hardcore online following, so I would love to know what fans of the original game think about this one and the series coming back and all the upgrades and changes they've made to it, which are interesting to some extent. That stylized flickering shading for the hyper strikes looks really cool. It's it's unusual to see that kind of effect, but it gives the hyper strikes a great sense of power, that was a nice creative choice, to be honest. So yeah, I know the original games, or 2 games, I think that was 2 games, they kind of had that style on the box art, so maybe that's what it's a reference to in some sense. With the gear and the stats, I think that's a cool mechanic, but I can easily see some broken builds that will break the game, which should be interesting to see rage quits to some extent. But yeah, I'm happy to see this game return. Hopefully it's good. And online should be interesting to actually see pretty tense matches, fingers crossed. Next one I want to talk about is going to be Kirby and the Forgotten Lands. This is them showing off the Mouthful mode, which essentially has, I guess, Kirby kind of eating something, and he kind of takes the shape of that thing that he is holding in his mouth. It's such an odd visual seeing Kirby eat and hold something bigger than him in his mouth. No wonder it became a bit of a meme. But that's Nintendo for you. They always come up with these unique concepts and visuals that really just gets people on board. It's kind of the reason why I like Nintendo. It's they're out of the box thinking to some extent, because too many developers nowadays, they just like to keep everything generic and boring, while you've got Nintendo adding all this, flair and color to their games, and people still want to talk shit on Nintendo. It's just come on, guys. But yeah, it is interesting. The fact that it's game mechanic, that's a game mechanic that is used for like platforming and puzzle solving as a great concept. You know, the fact that he takes the shape and he can do things and it gives him certain benefits and all that kind of stuff is great. It seems like this will be like the Super Mario Odyssey / Zelda Breath of the Wild of like the Kirby series, and I'm down for that. Kirby has worlds and environments that you never really explore, mainly because it was like a side scroller. But with this game, it will be amazing to actually experience his world and kind of like see everything about it and just kind of, you know, search and see all those nooks and crannies and things hidden. So yeah, the bosses also look good from what I've seen. Hopefully they'll actually be challenging, because I know with Nintendo bosses, you know, they can usually be just the easiest thing ever. And speaking of bosses, there was like a cat, like leopard boss in the game, or in the trailer I should say, and her name is apparently Chloraline. So yeah, that I just wanted to mention that because yeah, Chloraline, yeah, because she uses long claws. But yeah, no, Chloraline, Chloraline. I don't know why I said Chloraline. What the hell was that? Yeah, Chloraline. Yeah, brilliant. Next trailer we're going to talk about is for Chrono Cross, the Radical Dreamers edition. This is a re-release of the original game that was on, I believe, the PlayStation 1, I think. Don't quote me on that. I'm always a big fan of remasters. I prefer them to remakes if they're done with love and care, because some are not done with said love and care. And yeah, I'm yet to play any game from the Chrono Sega. I know about them, I just haven't got around to them yet. And yeah, if this remaster is good, I'll get this, because the original game, or both games, are expensive as hell. Yeah, good luck once again trying to get those. Thank goodness for the enemy encounter skipping, because we need that. Some of these older RPGs are rough in some sense, and yeah, I don't have time to really be dealing with every single enemy encounter, especially if I can't skip them or run away from them to that extent. But yeah, I'm just going to say it. If you're going to do a remaster or a re-release of an RPG from, let's say, the 80s, 90s or whatever, and you're not going to include the option of skipping encounters, don't bother releasing that game. I have to be mean, but yeah, don't bother, because I'm not playing your game. I don't have time for that kind of rubbish. Next game we have is Klonoa, Phantasy Reverie series. I believe that's what he's called, yeah. This is essentially going to be a remake of the first two Klonoa games, and this was probably the biggest surprise from the Direct, like seeing the unfortunately forgotten Klonoa return with remakes of two of his games. I would have loved for them to reveal a new game in the spirit of like the Mario 3D World games, but I'll accept these remixes. Hopefully we still get a brand new Klonoa game, and hopefully this is just like them teasing to see if people, you know, actually want that to some extent. The visuals are nice, but maybe I'll have to see more gameplay, because I'm not completely sold on the art style. But I might just buy it just to support the game in hopes of getting a brand new game. Next one we want to talk about, or I want to talk about, is going to be for Live Alive. This game never got released over in the West, so it's nice to see that this is finally getting a Western release. I don't know if anyone was actually screaming for it, but I'm happy that we're gonna get to play it to that extent. It's a very interesting game with a very unique art style that I would actually like to give a go of. I guess I'd like to play this just to see what it's like, because they don't really show off the actual gameplay in regards to like what you actually do. They kind of just more talk about like the story and how unique it is, which it is. And I mean, the ideas of playing as different characters from different time periods is a neat concept. You know, the one question I have is, are they all intertwined with each other, or are they all just like vastly different gameplays and stories? It should be interesting to see, but yeah, definitely, yeah, one to watch. I don't know what's going to happen with this game. I haven't really heard much about it. I know of it, but yeah, another nice surprise. Sticking with surprises, we have Xenoblade Chronicles 3, another series I've yet to play, but I still want to play. I know the original Xenoblade Chronicles, back when it originally came out on the Wii, was incredibly hard to get, because, at least in this country, because I think it was of limited quantities. So anytime you would see a copy in the wild, it'd be like £60, because anyone who had a copy knew how rare it was. I believe Ferret actually has a copy of that, so he's quite lucky. Yeah, it looks like they're returning to like the roots of the original series with more open world areas to look at and explore. I did find it funny, however, that, you're seeing all these anime characters, like cat girls, cat ears, there's one character has like wings on her head, and yet they all have British accents. Like, there should have been more variety in the cast, because clearly they've got just British voice actors to, do the English dub. But at the same time, as long as it's fun and that I can change the voices to Japanese or whatever, I don't really care. But it looks fine. Hopefully it'll be a little bit better than the second game, which I think went a little too anime to some extent. Like I'll be honest, I like my anime, but when you kind of get a bit too silly with it, yeah, I'm kind of like, next one and final one we have to talk about in terms of the Nintendo Direct is going to be Welcome to EarthBound. This is essentially the announcement trailer, essentially stating that EarthBound and EarthBound Beginnings are going to be, I believe, free to play and I guess download for anyone who has Nintendo's online pass or subscription, whatever it's called. I don't have it, so I don't know. But yeah, this trailer was really sweet. The guy who narrated this and the whole Direct did a wonderful job. He really came across as very charming and genuine, and I hope that he does like future Directs. I mean, it was nice to have a trailer just acknowledge the series and act as like an informative introduction to the EarthBound/Mother games, because yeah, there are some people that only know Ness from Smash, and that is quite unfortunate to an extent. I mean, obviously when I first played Super Smash Bros. Melee, I didn't know who Ness was. I thought he was part of the game. But yeah, this was a clever way to sweeten the deal and the price of Nintendo's online subscription. I kind of hope they do this with more games, but at the same time I kind of hope they don't. Realistically, they should just bring the price down. But yeah, it is wonderful to see the games become available again, and hopefully like more people do go and play these games. My only question now, really, at the end of the day, is where's Mother 2? Not Mother 2, sorry. Where's Mother 3? We need a complete EarthBound/Mother collection on cartridge now. Like, come on, Nintendo. That's what people really want. If they do that, I'll buy a Switch. I've been desperate to play the EarthBound games, because they're incredibly hard to find because of their popularity and just how rare they are. I know Mother 3 was on Game Boy Advance, but even still, just trying to find a copy of that is, that's rough. But yeah, a pretty good Nintendo Direct, I must say. They did actually a good job with this one. I will give them props. A lot of reveals, almost all of them coming out in the next few months. So yeah, if you have a Nintendo Switch, yeah, you best start saving, because that's some good stuff coming out. But yeah, we got one more game trailer to talk about, and that is going to be the, I guess, official release window trailer for Atomic Heart, which, I'll be honest, I've been sleeping on this game, and now I understand the hype. The trailer was exciting to say the least, and that was an awesome way to reveal/tease a release date. Go watch the trailer and you'll know what I mean. I'm sure most of you probably already seen it by now. But this game looks like BioShock and Binary Domain on crack, with a little bit of Doom sprinkled on top for good measures. Yeah, the gameplay looks fun as hell, man. Like, it's fast paced, it's very busy. It might be a little bit too much going. There might be a little bit too much going on in this game. I mean, it could just be the trailer and how they've edited it just to get people like really excited and hyped. But yeah, I hope that it isn't just like them just throwing everything at you without any real, planning or thought put into it, because then it would be an absolute mess. But yeah, I'm actually really interested in this game. The voice acting could be the weakest aspect of the game so far, and those said voices were not synced up to the lip movements. I noticed that in the trailer, but that's fine. It's fine, mainly because this game is going to release earliest at September. I'm pretty sure they'll sync the voices by then. But yeah, pretty good stuff overall in terms of games. We have 3 more trailers to talk about, and they actually are going to be film trailers. And yeah, I picked 3 that I thought were actually pretty interesting. I know there's a few that were pretty popular that came up, but yeah, I've made a cutoff point in terms of what I'm talking about. The first one I'm going to talk about is going to be for the trailer Gold. Film that came out of nowhere. I think it's a smaller budgeted film, but yeah, all I could think about while watching this trailer was Austin Powers Gold Member. I honestly wanted someone at some point to say in this trailer, I love gold, in reference to Goldmember himself from the film. If you haven't seen that film, it's great. But yeah, would love for this film to become a psychological thriller. I mean, it's implied that some things might be in his head, and the combination of that with it being like a survival kind of like ticking clock like film or element is pretty interesting to say the least. I hope it doesn't become like a CGI fest where he's being like chased by cartoon monsters or whatever. Just this is one of those films that doesn't need CGI, and I know that if it does use CGI, it'll be bad CGI. So that's, I guess, the main reason why I don't want to see that. I'm also a bit indifferent towards like the makeup in this film. Like, it's mainly starring Zac Efron, which is interesting to see him in, I guess, a film like this, but maybe he wants a challenge, I don't know. On one hand, I think it looks good, it's like unique, and it's kind of accurate to how painful it would be, but at the same time, I'm not sure what exactly is meant to be happening to his face. Like, is that what the desert, harsh sunlight does to you, or is this just some kind of, does this play into like the more psychological aspect of things? Because I know there's another lady in the trailer and her face is kind of weird. I don't know, is there like a post-apocalyptic vibe going on with this film? I don't know. It's interesting. Didn't really see a lot of people talking about it, so I wanted to mention it. Next trailer we're going to talk about is for Firestarter, coming out in the 2021 film, because it is based on a book by Stephen King, and there was an original film that came out back in, I want to say 1987, I think it was. No, 1984, my bad. Yet another film with Zac Efron in it. Maybe this will be his year to some extent, given he's already in 2, and hopefully they'll be good. But let's see how he performs in a more demanding role. But yeah, based on the book by Stephen King, and I guess by the film back in 1984, this one's kind of a mixed bag to some extent. There's a lot of things that do work in this trailer, and a lot of things that don't. And I guess I have to say, before we go anywhere, my stance when it comes to Stephen King film adaptations. There's only 7 good ones. The Shawshank Redemption, The Green Mile, The Shining, The Mist, Stand By Me, Carrie from 1976, and Christine from 1983. And yes, both It films are terrible, as well as the book, from what I've heard. Yeah, I don't think this film is really going to be in the leagues with all of those classics, but hey, I haven't seen the original, but I'm pretty sure that line about her being the first superhero, or whatever the woman said, which is, it's such a bad line. I think the dialogue is not great in this film. That whole line with her being the first superhero, that was not in the original book, nor the original film. It was most likely added in by a producer just to be relevant, and just so it can be like a trailer, line, so people go, oh my god, it's a superhero film. I haven't seen the original, but I'm pretty sure that line about her being like the first superhero film was, it was not in there. And, I get it. Like, they're trying to make this more of a superhero film, which I get. They're still pretty popular, but don't we have enough superhero films already? Like, this film comes across as very melodramatic, and my impressions of the original was that it was more similar to The Exorcist. This feels like a weak X-Men film, which is probably what they were going for. They're probably trying to make an X-Men film, which I can tell you right now, that's not the direction to go, especially when Marvel is, I guess, going to be doing a reboot of X-Men anyway. But yeah, I mean, the effects as well don't look great. Like, they're not believable. Like, they look like TV show quality / budget effects. I mean, fire isn't that hard to animate. You can just film it and composite it or include it in the scene. Like, it's not that hard, guys. But I think they're honestly just taking the easy way out to some extent. And I mean, geez, the main character, the girl, gosh, what an edgelord. Like, can someone please get her a copy of Rage Against the Machine's first album? Like, come on, man. There's like, oh, all those lines about her, oh, I kind of like hurting people, whatever. Oh, God, I can just see there being shirts with her face on it, or just saying Firestarter and Hot Topic. Oh, God. I guess one positive I will say about this film is the dynamic between the father and the daughter. He essentially wants to protect his daughter by having her, like, just hide her powers, while also knowing that she's capable of, like, mass destruction, and kind of like encouraging her to use said powers in order to protect her family and herself is kind of an interesting dilemma to some extent. Like, yeah, definitely makes me think, what would you do in that situation? But yeah, it's a really interesting film. I don't actually think it's going to be good, but it has some interesting ideas which are worth mentioning. And yeah, it was a film I wanted to talk about. And the last trailer we'll be talking about, we ended with a trailer for a film that is going to be distributed by A24 Pictures, and we're going to end with another film that A24 is going to be distributing, and that is going to be the simply titled film Men. Now, already this film is creepy as hell, because there is nothing scarier than a vague figure that resembles a human. That's one of the most horrifying things ever. Like, just ever. Like, if you haven't watched the trailer, go watch it and tell me that's not frightening. Because it is. My speculation about this film is that this is some kind of metaphor for the Garden of Eden. Because you see a single apple tree in the trailer. She's the only person we see. And the title card appears behind faintly moving snake skin. That may just be a coincidence, but we'll see, because I know the poster itself, it's like one of those sneaky, I don't know how you call it, it's one of those sneaky shots where it's actually like a skull, but it's just barely a skull, which is quite clever. So I don't know. But given how subtly disturbing Alex Garland's films are, I'm honestly really looking forward to this film. But yeah, it was a teaser trailer. There wasn't much to say, and I don't want to know any more about this film because I just want to watch it now. But yeah, that's pretty much going to wrap up this podcast. This has been, I would say, the longest podcast we've done so far this year, but there was so much to talk about. And already I can tell you, the next podcast we're going to have quite a few things to talk about as well. But yeah, I am looking forward to having my little break because I'm on holiday now. And yeah, I'm going to be trying to watch and play a couple of games. I've got a few games I still need to finish up, which is pretty bad. But yeah, I guess we will end this podcast with the video of the episode, which is simply titled Bustin'. I'm not going to tell you anything about this video. You just got to watch it. Some of you may have seen this video. Some of you may not. But I think given the day that this podcast is going up, it's quite the relevant and funny video. And I'm also in a good mood, so I just want to pick something silly. So yeah, definitely go watch this video. Definitely go check out those Kickstarters and everything else that's in the description and the download links. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. This was a little tricky for me to put together, so I really appreciate you guys listening to this, and hopefully you enjoyed it. I know this podcast is a little bit disorganized, a bit fractioned off, and that's because I kind of ran out of time in terms of putting this podcast together. So yeah, my notes aren't as well structured, so I'm sorry about that. I think I did repeat myself at some point when I was talking about I was talking about something, and I did unfortunately repeat myself when I was talking about like the fact that line about her being a superhero. I think I repeated it on accident because, sorry, I am actually reading notes off of my computer because, I actually write every podcast. But yeah, I just ran out of time. Work's been crazy. But I'm sure some of you can relate. But I am not going to ramble anymore about my life, and I am going to end this podcast like I always do by saying I was the Angry Raccoon, and I will see you on the next podcast.